Evidently, there are Nazis in Ukraine. Evidently, we hire mercenaries to fight our battles. Evidently. You've heard it all. Do you remember this guy? His name is Aiden Aslin, and up until the 2022 full-scale invasion, he was very well known online as Cossack Gundi, a British national serving in the 36th Separate Marine Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, who was showing the Western world exactly what it's like to live in a Ukrainian trench.
The thing people need to consider is that Ukraine's been in a state of war for roughly 8 years now.
But since 2022, he's much better known as the mercenary, put on a kangaroo trial and sentenced to death in the DPR by the Russian forces. I had the honor and the absolute pleasure of having a chat with Aiden, in which we discussed so many incredible things, including the fact that Aiden himself used to believe in Russian propaganda. Yeah, can you imagine that? A Ukrainian Marine? He'll tell you all about it. And he'll also tell you how he ended up being a Ukrainian Marine and much more. And then in the next episode, we're gonna hear a lot more about his journey through Mariupol and Russian captivity. So if you don't want to miss, like this channel, subscribe, and turn on all of your notifications so you can know exactly when a new video comes out. Without further ado, Aiden. I wanted to start with this is, I know that you've served in Ukraine since 2017, right?
2018, back in October is like when I officially signed my contract.
Obviously, one of the biggest things that Russians were doing, particularly to you, was that you were a mercenary who was paid to like help the Ukrainian army, and that was the whole like shindig of them putting you on this kangaroo trial. And how did you end up serving in Ukraine, and what did you do? Like you were in the military before this, obviously. So what did you do beforehand?
Previously, back in like 2015, I was never like in the British military. So like back in 2014, like ISIS like started making their appearance, like well known and like committing all the atrocities. And then basically I got frustrated with the fact that the Western like world like didn't really do anything to like stop ISIS from like reclaiming all this territory that we'd spent like the past 20 years like in Iraq, well the past like 12 years at that time, like in Iraq, basically all for nothing. And then they expanded and like they went to the mountain of Sinjar and Shangal, where they started committing like mass atrocities against the Yazidi people, like mass murder, just because of their religion and like whatever like your beliefs were. Like if it wasn't with them, then you'd be killed or like sold into slavery basically. So I was like very frustrated with the way nothing was really done to like help combat like the threat that ISIS posed and the atrocities that they were doing. So I finally just decided like I'd had enough of it, and like instead of like sitting at home and complaining about everything, I'm gonna like go out and do something. Also saw that they took like Western volunteers, so I decided I was going to go out there, like do what I intend to do, like do whatever I can to like help the Kurdish people like defend themselves, and also help the Syrian people and whatnot to defend themselves against the ISIS threat. And then fast forward to like 2017, I'd been there like on 2 like deployments. Well, I call them deployments. It's just like I've been there 2 times and spent like in total maybe a year and a half, like in total, like on both trips, like all together. And then towards the end of it, because I had like a bit of a harassment from the police, I didn't want to live in Britain anymore after that. And along with that, I'd also been following the conflict from like Ukraine from the very beginning, like after Maidan. I mean, in the beginning of the conflict, I was actually like pretty pro-Russian. Followed like I followed a lot of the like propaganda like outlets like Russia Today and stuff like that. And it wasn't till because like when Maidan happened, I was like following like all the Russian Today stuff, like it's Nazis taking over and all this stuff. I never really paid attention to like the other stuff that was like coming out like from people that were actually there. And then Crimea happened, and then I started like I started changing. I was like, this doesn't seem right. Like this, like They've got like a bunch of like Ukrainian Marines like that they're surrounding, and they're like trying to say they're Nazis, and there's just like guys stood there like wondering like what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
And then I started like this ain't right, and then I started doing more research, and I was like, hang on a minute, like Russia's the bad guy here. And then Donbass happened, and when I saw that, like I mean, again, like I was still a bit like, you know, in between, and then again I did more research, and I was like, this doesn't add up. Like there's countless like evidence out there that shows like Russian troops were actively like taking part and leading like these small groups of like pro-Russian like people. I mean, realistically, there was like pro-Russian people in Maidan, but like they were like a minority.
Yeah.
And they were backed heavily like by Wagner and like Russian troops under the skies of like these are local like troops, which they weren't. And like photos and like videos that shows like the Russian military in Donbass, like there's like the images of like the BTR 82AM, which only Russia has, but there's no, like the Ukrainians don't even have that model. So there was like videos of like the T-90 tank in Donbass, which was like geolocated. So there was a lot of stuff like that was just geolocated to like Ukraine, like on the map, like they worked out where it was and put two and two together, and it was like this isn't like separatists, this is like Russian like servicemen. Yeah. And then of course you had Vice News, who in the early part of the war did a very good job of like covering the conflict day by day. I got educated like a lot by like the early dispatches. They did a really good job of it, especially with Simon Ostrovsky. So I followed that series like religiously. Like I was like always like following what was going on, and then like you fast forward to like 2017, I'd finished like my time in Syria. When I came back, I decided like I want to like move on to something else, like something where I can like try and start a new life. And then I figured I didn't want to go into civilian work because after all that, like I decided I couldn't go to a normal job, and I was like, okay, like Ukraine is still going on, and I also know that the Ukrainian military, you can serve as a foreigner legally. And I was like looking into the details and the terms of the service and whatnot and what you get in return. Obviously it was like Ukrainian salary, like, so like, I mean, to me as a Westerner, like the salary was like bare minimum. It was like, at that point, it was still 8,000 hryvnia a month, which is like nothing compared to like the salary in the West. So that didn't really bother me because I didn't really go there for the money. And then they said like in return, when you complete like 3 years like military service, you'll be eligible to take like Ukrainian citizenship, which I plan to do. I went to the commissariat and started my official like military enlistment program. I'm not sure what the situation is now with it. I presume it's still the same, or maybe it's even easier. But back then, you could come as a citizen. You didn't have to apply for a visa. You get like 3 months like to stay in the country, and then you have to leave for 3 months. So I spent 3 months just trying to get into the military, and there was like some problems. So then I ended up having to leave Ukraine for 3 months. I decided I'll go to Serbia to go check out Serbia for a short while. And then I went to Hungary, and then on to Poland. And then by that time, it was like time to come back. So I came back to Ukraine, and like within a week, I had my documentation stuff sorted and got sent on to the training center.
How did you serve in the 36th Marine Brigade from the very beginning, or?
In the beginning, they originally sent me to Odessa to go to Dachne to apply for an invitation from the 35th Brigade, and I got put into the 137th Battalion, so Police Moya. And after like a few months, I didn't really like living in Dachne because it's just a village in the middle of nowhere north of Odessa, so it wasn't really a nice place to like live when you're not on the when you weren't on the polygon or weren't on deployment, because there wasn't really anything to do there. So I wanted to move somewhere where it was like closer to the city, and I learned about like Nikolaev, because like the base for like the 1st Battalion, like the 36th Marine Brigade, they're based inside the city, so it was a lot more convenient. So I put in a transfer request to transfer to the 1st Marine Battalion, And then like within like 3 months, I think it was, I got sent to the battalion.
Were you under the command of Volina throughout this conflict, or did you have a different commander?
The 1st Marine Battalion, it's a separate battalion. It acts independently from the brigade, but we're still under the brigade command. Although we weren't really directly under like Volina, like we still had to like listen in regards to some stuff. But like our commander was Bother, who, like I said, he was released alongside myself as well.
Amazing, yeah. That exchange in general was a very, was a very critical exchange. Honestly, when I heard about 215 POWs being released, and it was so seemingly out of nowhere, right? I was like, wow, this is such a big, I follow this very closely, and I'm like, it must be just like it must be POWs that Russia completely like just didn't, use for any of their propaganda and anything. And then I did the list of the names, and I was like, how did that happen? I still think that this was a very like a very calculated move on Russia's behalf, because they were like, okay, well, so we're going to give you 215, then the world is not going to care anymore, and we're not going to have to release any more POWs because nobody's going to push for them anymore, right? Because what else would be their motive to release so many people that they have used and abused so like time and time and again to feed their narrative, right?
During the whole ordeal, I mean, obviously the 10 foreigners, I mean, that surprised me. Like I was like really shocked when I realized they were like exchanging like all 10 of us. Towards the end, I started to actually believe that we were probably going to be shot, because the way I saw it was that in the beginning, like when they started saying, oh, you're a mercenary, like, do you know what the death sentence is? Do you know what the sentence is for mercenaryism? And they were like saying it's the death sentence. So they were lying to us like from the very beginning, like trying to like say like, oh, mercenaries will get the death sentence. And then eventually I later learned like the sentence for like mercenary like isn't the death sentence, it's just 7 years in prison. And they pushed heavily on this like seizing power of trying to change the constitution of like Donetsk, which is the death sentence. For a long time thinking before the court that they're gonna like say we're gonna like be threatened with a death sentence, and they're going to like, let's go be all barbaric, but then in the end, they're going to like show, oh, but we've got humanity, we're good people, so we're not going to give them the death sentence because we're not that bad, and we're better than the Ukrainians, and they're going to just give us like life in prison or something. And then they just like came and just like slapped us with like death sentence. So I was like, wow, okay, that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. Like towards the end, and like when it like came to like mid-September, when our appeal was like finished, the processing and that, like we didn't hear anything. They didn't come and tell us anything. And I started getting like anxious, and it was like something happened. Like have they just decided like no, they're not going to do anything, and then just not even going to do anything about it, or like am I waiting to be shot? Like what's going on? We didn't get to speak to our lawyer at all properly. I mean, he wasn't a lawyer. He was more like a prosecutor. Like he wasn't on our side. He was obviously like on their side, obviously.
Obviously you were living in like an information vacuum, and they were just feeding you whatever it is that they were feeding you.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea of like the world support, or did you count on the world to sort of support you?
Well, just before I surrendered, I made like a proof of life video, like just.
If you're watching this, it means that we've surrendered. We lasted about a month, 2 weeks in the city of Mariupol. We finally exhausted all our resources, ran out of ammunition, food. The only thing we had left was water.
We basically had no other choice but to surrender. I hope that the Russians like treat us fair or something and stick to the Geneva Convention. Obviously, they didn't do that. I put the video out there so people knew, like, so if anything did happen to us, there was that video out there to like say, hey, look, these guys were alive like a day before. Like what happened? And it wasn't till like maybe like 2 weeks or like 3 weeks later when I started like calling, and I was able to call my family, and then I think it was like a month later, my fiance, she managed to get to Britain when I called once, and she just got on the phone. Like the first thing she said to me is like, don't listen to any of the bullshit, baby, it's all fucking propaganda. like working hard to get your release. Like, don't listen to the bullshit. Like, don't let them brainwash you. As you saw, like out of all the other foreigners, I was the only one they used for like propaganda. I already had a like following. Like, I was already like well known to a degree, like on social media and whatnot. And literally, the first thing the Russians said to me was like, "Oh, you're a famous blogger." And then I realized, like, as soon as they said that, like, I realized, okay, I see where this is going. When I surrendered, we got taken to a filtration place, like some empty warehouse in Sartanar, and they basically just like filtered us out and stuff. And obviously, when they saw my passport, I got beat a bit. I mean, it wasn't badly; it was just a bit, like a few like punches to the face and stuff, and then they stopped it. And like the next day, some guys from like the intelligence service and Donetsk like came like questioned me and stuff like that, said I was a mercenary and I was a sniper. I just like I said I wasn't. I was like serving in the Ukrainian military, like officially. The Russians that morning, they had actually come and interviewed me. I had my military, my voyenny ballet, and my ubida and my passport. And when I finished with them, they kept my ubida and my fucking military ticket and just gave my passport back.
Evidence.
Gave me my passport back, and then later that day, the like KGB guys, like intelligence guys, like came, like put handcuffs on me, put me in the back of the car. As soon as I got in the car, they put a hood on me and they said I'm like being taken to be shot. Which I just pretended I didn't understand what they said and just like remained quiet. But I knew I was being taken somewhere, and I had my suspicions it was like Donetsk, because as I got into the car, I saw like it had the DPR, like DNR, like license plate. I was kind of hoping I'd be taken to Russia, because like I'd rather be in Russian than being like Donetsk.
Did you think that like Russian military or like Russian guards or whatever would just be more fair, or like less like circus about this whole situation than Donetsk guards? Or what was the motivation behind you hoping that you were going to end up in Russia rather than Donetsk?
Because the conflict's gone on for 8 years. Realistically speaking, and I did observe it and see it, realistically speaking, it would make more sense to like brainwash the locals. And I knew, just because, I mean, just some of the videos and stuff I'd seen and like heard about Donetsk and whatnot, like it didn't sound like a nice place to be, especially like some of the locations that I read about, like with Radio Svobod and like Radio Europe. They like done quite a few like good articles about some of the places where they kept prisoners. And it was like some of the places I never wanted to go to, like from what I heard. And I kind of figured, I mean, Russian soldiers, I mean, they're still scumbags, but like in comparison to like the local like separatists, well, pro-Russian like militia guys, and like during that whole car ride there, like I knew 100% I was about to be beaten at some point. Like I just knew it was coming. It was like it was the only logical like thing. Once I arrived to Donetsk, I got out of the car. They put a hood on me, and then some guy came up to me. I didn't understand anything he said. He like spoke in some like really thick like Gopnik sort of like accent, and I said to him like, "Можно, пожалуйста, повтори? Я не понял." As soon as I said that, I just got like hit over the head with like a police stick and hit a few more times with it, and then he hit me on the back here, but then he then dragged me inside and basically beat the shit out of me. It lasted like 2 hours basically, but while he was like beating the shit out of me, he would stop and then he would ask me a question, and I'll give him an answer, and then he just like beat me regardless of like whether the answer was positive or negative. And then eventually he stopped, and he like asked me like, what, like who are you? Like I was like, this is like, what's your citizenship? I was like British, and then he beat me for that. And then I told him like I'm in the Ukrainian Marines, like I signed a contract like back in 2018. And then I told him I was in Minimut, and then he beat me for that, obviously, because it's like the 120s. It's one of the units, it's like a unit you don't want to be in when you get caught, obviously. And then after a few more beatings, he stopped, and he basically like got down to like eye level, and he says like, "Did you see like what I did to you?" And then he like pointed to my back, and then I looked, and then I realized I'd been stabbed. It was like quite a big like open like puncture wound, and as soon as I saw I was stabbed, I didn't really know what to think. Like all I heard is like people get beat, tortured, etc. But I never expected to be stabbed. And when I realized I had been stabbed, I was like these guys might be about to kill me. There's going to be like a video similar to like what I've seen on the internet where like they just do some like gruesome stuff, like stab them repeatedly like through the throat or something. And then he like asked me like, do I want a beautiful death or do I like want a quick death? And then I was like saying I want like a quick death. And he says, no, you're going to get a beautiful death. One of the guys who spoke English, he came in and he was like, look, like we can make this all stop if you just speak. We'll give you some water. We'll give you some medical like to bandage you up. And, you know, by this point, I'd been beaten for like 2 hours. I've like lost blood. I was like in and out of consciousness. So I went into survival mode at this point because, you know, they, at least in the military, they always tell you like from a Western point of view to like slowly give them information so that the headquarters can have time to change stuff. But at that point, our entire battalion, like a brigade, had surrendered. Like, so there was no way you could like slowly give them information because they would have got it anyway from other guys that you surrendered with. And so the only way I figured was like just try to give them whatever information I knew that was basically out there on the internet.
And I feed them what they want to hear, I guess, right? I'll backtrack a little bit. One of the reasons why I asked if you were like expecting people to push for you, right, is because unlike most of the people in the Ukrainian military, you already did have like a pretty big social media presence, right? And one of the things that I observed when your unit surrendered is all of the international media started with Aiden Aslin has been like captivated in Russia. And then you read the article and then you find out that along with you, there were a lot more other people captured, right? So like your name was on a headline of absolutely everything. And I would assume that you would know that there would be that, you know, at least that amount of following that you have would have gone out and been enraged and would have continued like reposting and reposting and reposting it, because you know how social media works. You know, I hope that there was at least that sort of back thought to it where, you know, people were going to find out about it internationally, which they did. And trust me, there was, I don't think your name came out of most publications worldwide for a very long time.
What surprised me, I mean, I knew there was going to be, I knew that the social media side would help our situation, like in regards to just like letting everyone know. Because when I did that proof of life video, I said, like, it's like Aiden Aslin, like Cossack Gundi, like myself and like fucking members of like the 1st Marine Battalion of the 36th Marine Brigade, like we've got no choice, but we have to surrender. And I had to tell people that it wasn't just me, it was my battalion and the brigade. And also after I did this video, I did a phone call. I called a friend, and I don't know why. They put this part of this phone call out, and it was me talking to my friend about like my friend was like trying to tell me to get out of the city, and I told him that it was like impossible. Like, and then I said to him, "This is like just know like they're going to 100% like use me for like bullshit propaganda," which they did.
Of course. So as far as I know, that when you surrendered, there was a push basically for the 36th Marine Brigade and with all of its units. I believe it was like 1,200 people altogether, right? To unite with that last batch of Azov that was in Mariupol, because Mariupol was divided, right? It was sort of like that one encirclement here, and then there was Azovstal, and you were all supposed to meet together, and it was supposed to be like over 1,500 people or something, and you were going to do a corridor to Azovstal. And then what ended up happening is your brigade didn't make it, right? And it was basically the majority of the people, and then Volhyna and 180 or so people met with Azov, and they did the breakthrough on Azovstal, the one that was like basically a bloodbath on the bridge, right? So why did you surrender as opposed to trying to break through to Azovstal?
Well, when we got told the options, like I didn't like all I got told was that we're gonna like try and break out of the city and like basically drive to the Ukrainian lines in Zaporizhzhia. So like for like as far as I knew for like the longest time was like everyone in Mariupol was like preparing to like break through. Eventually, like day by day, like when I would get internet, I would like look at the map and then I'd see like it's just getting smaller and smaller, and then eventually I saw when like the Russians like basically cut us in half, and then eventually like the time came where we just got told like you can either like come with us to try and break out of the city to like drive to like Ukrainian lines in Zaporizhzhia, or you can stay here. And I just like chose to surrender because like I mean it wasn't just me surrendering, there's like quite a lot of other people that were like choosing to surrender. And I just realized like if I do go with him, like especially with the high concentration of like artillery airstrikes, like me personally, like just with the experience of what I've seen before and like stuff like that, like from Syria where ISIS tried to do something similar, like they just get decimated by artillery and like airstrikes. And I just knew if I went, it was like most likely just going to be a suicide mission. But I knew if I chose to surrender, there was a big possibility that I could be killed. But there was also a possibility, like a pretty realistic possibility, that I would actually return home and see my family again. Yeah. You know, when I was in Syria, you could never have the thought of surrender, because if you surrendered to ISIS, then you knew you're going to be tortured, and then you're eventually going to be like mock executions, and eventually they will kill you in a very gruesome way. And a lot of the guys over there, myself included, we were prepared to like kill ourselves if it came to something similar like that. But like with Russia, like I knew there was not a big chance, but the percentage, like statistically, like it was higher than it was like compared. Even though Russians are scumbags, and I prepared myself mentally because I knew what I was about to go through wasn't going to be a nice like experience. It was going to be very hard on myself mentally. I think what made me surrender is the fact that I wanted to get back to see my fiance, like the important thing, because I promised her like that I would get back to her like no matter what.
It's very it's kind of like a out of everything gruesome, it's a very sweet sort of like thing, because you don't necessarily think about yourself in this scenario. You're just sort of probably you must be exhausted from all of this, you know, at this point. Like I don't think a person is really like thinking about like their own life and like their future and stuff, because you've just gone through so much that you're like, you know what, whatever will be. But then you remember that there is someone who is like waiting there for you, and they're not going to have that, you know, they're not going to have whatever
thing as well. Like especially with the situation Mariupol, it was a very difficult situation. I mean, we did good enough with the fact that we survived for so long, and because of that, like we were able to take the resources out of the Russian offensive elsewhere in the country, and like in Mykolaiv. We took a lot of their resources because they were trying to take this key city, which, as they said, it should have been so easy for them, but it ended up being like a bloodbath for them.
It came to be so that Russia ended up wasting so many resources on Mariupol alone, you know, and it's crazy to see this, even to like a naked eye of someone who doesn't know anything about military or doesn't know anything about how it works. You know, it's like it's one steel plant completely surrounded. It's one part of the city completely surrounded, and they're throwing all of their resources on like this many men, provided they have this many, and they can't take them down. It's crazy.
Yeah, for the most part, when we fell back to Mariupol, I decided like, because you know, for like the past like 2.5 years, like I've been filming like my own like documentary about like life in the trench, like just trying to, like, it wasn't about me, it was about like the guys I was with, like the Ukrainians, but like trying to like film about like the psychology of like trench warfare like in the 21st century. So for like a long time I had like all this footage, and then like all these interviews I did. And when the invasion happened, I had my camera equipment and stuff, which I had with me because I was still building this documentary, and I was hoping to finish it by the end of the rotation. So by the time we got to Mariupol, I was like this, like why am I going to fight? Like what am I going to do? Like if I get caught in the mortar pit as a foreigner, I'm just probably going to get executed. And I can probably do a lot. I can do a lot more better like work for Ukraine by fucking trying to document everything that's going on with my camera. I managed to get a video out when we had some internet. Situation was in the city, and like how Russia's like purposely targeting like the civilian areas. That went viral from what I saw. and just basically just trying to bring attention to Mariupol. And like in between that, like I was like just helping with the logistical stuff at the battalion headquarters, helping with the ammunition and just basic stuff like that. I was helping prepare the vehicles, lifting the metal sheets so they can like weld it to the trucks and stuff to eventually like break out of Mariupol if it ever came. And I was just like filming everything. I was like filming the airstrike stuff that they were doing against the city. I was like filming like the guys like building like the preparations and just basic life in the bunker, and just getting whatever like footage I could, because I knew if there was a possibility we did get out, then there was a story to be told with the Ukrainians who were fighting. And me being a foreigner, like the best thing I could do is like amplify and be that voice so that they can like hear the story.
Was that footage saved anywhere, or did Russians delete it?
No, so before I surrendered, I did my phone call to my family, and then I just destroyed everything. I destroyed my phone, destroyed my SIM card, and then like destroyed the SD cards. And then I destroyed my camera, which was like $3,000 or $4,000 worth of like camera equipment. But I destroyed everything because I knew if they get their hands on it, there's videos of like guys in there that I filmed and stuff that they could use against myself or them.
That's very unfortunate, but also obviously like a very necessary step. It's just really sad that so much like chronology and so much documentation of Mariupol is gone. How did you end up in Mariupol? So you were stationed in Mykolaiv. An idea that I want to get is on 24th of February, was it a surprise for you that all of this started happening and all of these rockets were flying, or were you like ready? Were you prepared for all of this?
Since last year when they did the previous military buildup, obviously it wasn't as big, but at that time I was saying that it's big enough for them to do an incursion into Donbass and like take it. Quite a like 70% chance that it might happen, but I wasn't like too I was a bit skeptical that it would happen. And then it wasn't till like late October time when the pro-Russian side started like using artillery and stuff. And then the Ukrainians, like in the like justifiable like excuse, they had a justifiable reason to use the Bayraktar drone. They disabled one of the artillery guns that was shooting, and they didn't even use like a heavy payload. They used like the minimum bare necessary just to disable the gun and not injure or kill anyone that was nearby it. Russian propaganda like blew it out of proportion. They like tried to say, oh, they've like used this illegal like banned weapon, even though the video shows them themselves like using an illegal banned weapon. And obviously, like we started seeing like all this like troop movement to the border with Ukraine, and they were like, so we're gonna, it's like just routine like exercise, which in Russians like mentality is like just complete bullshit. And then eventually, like as soon as I saw the troop movement, I was like, okay, this is going to be their excuse. This is going to be how they like make an excuse to like invade again. Eventually, by the end of November, like it just kept going, and it just didn't stop. Like every day there was just troop movement. And then I was like, okay, this is preparation for invasion. And eventually towards like the end of like December, that's when we started seeing like the logistical vehicles and the medical vehicles being like transported. And I was like, okay, like this is 100% preparation for invasion. Like why would they be bringing this stuff? And again, it just didn't stop. It just continued all the way through January. And it's like no matter like a question of like if, like just a question of when. What I didn't realize, or just completely was oblivious to, I didn't realize until I found it online. The Olympics were like the Winter Olympics were this year, and then I just remembered like the last time they invaded Ukraine was when the Winter Olympics finished, and then I remembered Georgia, the Winter Olympics finished. And then we went to the front line in Pavlopol back in November 2021. So we were on the front line when it happened, and like when just like 2 weeks before the invasion, like I went on vacation, and I remember speaking to my fiance like at home in Mykolaiv. I was like telling her like to like pack a bag, like just pack your bags, because like I'm guaranteed something's gonna happen and you need to be prepared. Like if you need to like leave Mykolaiv, like you need to be ready. And she didn't expect it. Like she was like, oh, it's not gonna happen. They do it every year. I was like, babe, like trust me, like something's gonna happen. Even when when it came to me leaving, I was like hesitant to like go back because like I knew it was coming. And the thing that like kind of annoyed me was like a lot of people were like still like, oh, you're just being paranoid. And I got back, and like 2 weeks later after being back, actually I think it was like a week later. It was like a week after I got back from vacation. Like like it was like I think it was on the weekend before the invasion. Like we literally got like a message like everyone had been put into standby. People were being recalled from vacation. I was like, okay, this might be it. And like the Russian side started like using like artillery and like 155 millimeter artillery like in Luhansk, and even like at one point they started using Grad in the Luhansk region. And I was like, okay, like now they're using Grad, like it's just that's the sign that this is going where I think it's going. And then on February 23rd, we got a command like issued like that a warning order had been issued, like turn all electronics off and basically get ready.
3 months before the invasion, I kept getting text messages like once a week from a friend of mine being like, oh, I was watching the news and Putin's going to attack Ukraine, you know? And I'm like, guys, you know, he's done all of these troop movements before, like, just, you know, just relax, like, we'll see. And then what really bothered me was when Zelensky took 10 minutes out of his clearly very, very busy day to tell Ukrainians that everything is going to be okay and they should stop panicking and that like we should all just chill out and nothing's going to happen. And I was like, oh, we're screwed. Because if he needs to go on air and he needs to like calm down the nation, then there is a reason why he needs to do that. And then messages started getting more and more frequent, and then someone messaged me on like the 24th because it was middle of the night in the US, and I started getting like a ton of text messages from my friends being like, what's happening, and I'm kind of like opening my eyes, you know, I'm just like, what is happening? I don't know what's happening. And I opened the like the internet, and I was like, oh my god. So I called my dad, he picked up the phone, and he was like, listen, I'm running against time, I don't know what to do, there is a war, Putin attacked us, I've heard an explosion near Lviv, I am okay, I will call you when I can. And he hung up, and I'm just like, okay. Like what do I do from here? And from sort of was just like, oh my gosh. And I recorded a video and put it out there, and that video then like blew up, you know, and people started asking.
You know, that was the whole reason I opened my social media account, was to like make a platform, especially being a Westerner, to give my observation, like my experience, and like just basically inform people, because I knew being a Westerner, people would like choose to listen to me over. I mean, it sounds bad, but people would choose to listen to me because I'm a Westerner rather than listen to a Ukrainian person.
Yeah, because unbiased.
It's just the way the world is, unfortunately. But I knew like just by opening that, I could use it to like positively like help like inform people about Ukraine. Like in the beginning, I was like pretty pro-Russian. Not that I was like pro like Russian as in like I supported Russia, but like I was like pro-Russian because like I looked at like the Russian media and I was like, oh, like, maybe they're the good guys, that they're like just getting rid of the Nazis that like seize power. And then obviously like I did my research and I was like, oh, hang on a minute, it's just all bullshit. There is like Nazis and like nationalists in Ukraine, but there's Nazis and nationalists in Russia, and then there's like
in England, in the US,
there's like Britain and London, and I always like try to say to people, because people always like, yeah, but like in Britain you don't have like something like the Azov battalion or something. He says, yeah, but we're not at war in Britain. Like, and I say to him, he says, yeah, like in the beginning, Azov battalion did have like a very big like hot problem with like Nazis, but when the Ukrainian government came into they said like, look, if you want to like be a part, if you want to stay around, and you need to get rid of all this bullshit, and they cleansed it like pretty much and just got rid of the people that were the problem.
I definitely can relate. I can 100% relate to what you're saying, that like people would rather listen to a Westerner, you know, like I have a much easier time relating to my audience and relating to Americans than like a lot of other Ukrainians do. It's like I'm very assimilated into America. But the way I like to explain the whole like Azov battalion situation, right? Like I'm a graphic designer, right? It's not as what's its face controversial as like a man with super far right leanings organizing a militia to fight the Russian invasion. I see the difference here, but realistically, if you were to look at what I'm doing the same way as you're looking at Azov, it would be okay. I'm a UX designer talking about Ukraine online. This channel is not about Ukrainian history. It's about graphic design. And I could not have made it about Ukrainian history because I'm a graphic designer. And if I'm a graphic designer, the only thing I'm good to do in life is graphic design, right? And there can be no other agenda there. It was a reaction to the Russian invasion and to fight the Russian invasion, not to like spread the word of Hitler.
Also, like one of the other things they like to do, they like to just okay, they're all Nazis, but then they totally forget about like the other like groups. There's like, do you know Hoods clan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's those guys that that came out at the beginning, but they were all part of like leftist like groups that were already in Ukraine. I'm pretty like left, like anarchist, like libertarian, like leaning. So then you've got like in like Badko, well, you've got Lester McNo from Zaporizhzhia, and it was always funny because when I was in captivity, they would say I'm a Nazi, and I was like, no, I'm not. And I was like, then what are you? I was like, anarchist. Like, anarchist. It was like what do you mean you're anarchist? I was like, anarchist, and it was like. I was like, why are you an anarchist? I was like, no, do you know anything about like Ukrainian history? And it was like, what do you mean? I was like, do you know who Lester McNo is? And it was like, no. And it was like, no. And then like, what are you doing here?
Like, what do you mean, Aiden? You do not listen to Patriarch Kirill and you do not follow the Russian Orthodox Church.
Because they tried to do that in the very beginning. I mean, I'm sure you saw the video where they put the Azov battalion like shirt on me. And when they gave it to me, when they gave it to me, like I kind of like I was like laughing to myself inside because like it was like so stupid because like everyone that follows me for the longest time, everyone knows my political like leanings and stuff. Like people like they know I've talking like I mean I'm not like spoke shit about Azov. I said like there is nationalists there, but they are a good regiment because they're disciplined, they're very professional, and they're very good fighters.
It's like the whole thing where what bothers me about all of this, right, is like when people talk about Azov per se, right, it's always like, oh, that like they talk about it like it's a cult or it's like a sect. Someone asked me, what's the religion in Azov? And I'm like, it depends on which member you ask. It's like it's like the Navy SEALs. It's an elite unit that has a terrible rap, right? Because of Russian propaganda. Sure. Are there bad guys in there? 100%. Are there bad guys in the Navy SEALs? Are there bad guys in the British Royal Army? Yeah. The difference is also like nationalists and Nazis in Ukraine are different because you can be a super like high on the spectrum there nationalist, right? Like I'm a nationalist. Am I going to go kill people? No. Like, but I just don't want Russians in my country because I want my culture to be preserved because I'm Ukrainian, But like, that doesn't mean I'm going to be like running around, like screaming Ukraine is for Ukrainians and like annihilating anybody who's like British or something else. It's just that I want my culture to survive.
Like the basic like history stuff, like they just like listen to what Russia feeds them. And they were like, oh, so what do you think about Bandera? And obviously, when I was doing the interviews, I had to just like go along with, oh, he's a Nazi and stuff like that. But I mean, like, but realistically, like, I mean, I don't really like Bandera because like he's a bit too hardcore, and he did have his like he did for a short period like collaborate, but at that time it was like completely like different. Like, and then eventually when he declared like independent Ukraine, like the Nazis like said like, no, you can't do that, like you can't do that, like you take that back otherwise. And then they went and put him in a concentration camp, and I was like saying like, he said like, you guys do know your history about like Stefan Bandera, and obviously I couldn't argue with him, but like I know about his history, and I was like, yeah, like I mean, me personally, I think he's a bit of a knob, but he did have like his views were for Ukraine. Like all the stuff they tried to say was like, oh, but he was a Nazi collaborator because the UPA, like they collaborated. Not UPA. How do you say it?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
they brought up the OUN. They were collaborating with the Nazis. I was like, hang on a minute, like, you do realize there's like two different groups of OUN. There's the group that like went and collaborated, and then there's the group
yeah,
that was Bandera's lot,
yeah.
who like went and fought against them.
I mean, there is
And they,
also a whole, they're missing the context completely as well, because it's like, if you think about, yes, Bandera is like not, he's not the best, he's a sinner.
yeah,
I'm not even religious, but he's a sinner. Let's put it that way.
yeah,
Like, he's definitely a guy who has a lot of really like crazy stuff in his background. And you can't just be like, oh my gosh, no, he's innocent. He's not. His methodology was pretty like out there, and he was very like harsh in what he was doing. But the context is that you need to understand that we were invaded at that point by Russia, by Germany, and by Poland. And this man was like, well, what do I do to keep my country mine, right? And like keep our people
yeah.
not enslaved to like other places.
The good old conversations about Stepan Bandera, the mighty favorite of Russian propaganda. Well, that was something, wasn't it? And we left you on this cliffhanger about Stepan Bandera, the absolute favorite of Russian propaganda. So next week we're going to discuss Stepan Bandera and Ukrainian nationalism a little more in depth, and we're also going to cover some things to the extent to which Aiden can talk about them, about his journey through Russian captivity. Today, Aiden is back to England, preparing to come back to Ukraine and start his career as a frontline journalist. And I, for one, am incredibly excited to see where that takes him. And in the next episode, you're gonna find out a little more details on that. On that note, I'll see you later, and don't forget to subscribe.